I'm sorry, we have no vacancies tonight. We're fully booked.
There are some other hotels up the street. Do you know anything about them? Can you recommend another hotel?
Well, there is the Poly House.
Many guests who come to Minneapolis enjoy a pleasant stay at the Poly House. Unfortunately, this was not the case for one individual who committed suicide there last night. The guest came from North Dakota and he drank a lot. He had been accused of stealing a bolt of silk from a dry goods store. So he ordered up all this whiskey from the bellboy down below in the hotel. And then during the night, he put a pistol to his left eye and pulled the trigger. The bullet passed through his head and went through the wall into the room next to his. The man was surprised that the bullet had not killed him. So he got up and walked over to the mirror on the dresser, and he looked over the wound with his remaining eye. He raised the gun to his head and shot himself again through the head, leaving a bloody mess. And no one had heard the shots at all because of the noisy train station nearby. The Poly Hotel normally has a very attentive staff, and now that the police have finished up their investigations, I'm sure the hotel workers have undoubtedly fixed up the room, and that room might be available if you inquire about it.
There is the Hennepin Avenue Lodging House.
I don't think that the Hennepin Avenue Lodging House is currently allowing guests in or out of that place. The police are still posted outside. As it happened, one of their guests, Mr. Anderson, a visitor from Scandinavia, suddenly believed that he had contracted smallpox while he was on a visit to Chicago. He didn't know what to do, so he left his hotel room and then went out onto the street and cried out to a policeman. The patrolman on the street told Anderson to walk over to the entrance of the city hall and just wait outside. A doctor was summoned who examined Anderson under the outside lights of a nearby saloon and determined that he indeed had smallpox. Everybody in the boarding house had to become immediately vaccinated by the health authorities. So I don't think anybody is allowed in or out of the Hennepin Avenue Lodging House, and you might want to avoid being anywhere near there, at least for the time being. Most people that come to Minneapolis these days, they just want to be safe, and that's usually why I advise you just to stay inside at night. But over at the Hennepin Avenue Lodging House, there was an incident that was most peculiar because a whole gang of criminals moved into the place as guests. Can you imagine renting a room and all the other rooms in the hall are rented by criminals? Well, that's exactly what happened, and it was one of the most vicious gangs Chicago had to offer. They were killers, and there was a nationwide manhunt to try to find them. Ultimately, the gang was caught at the lodging house in a surprise raid by the police after some of their mail had been intercepted, and the whole crew was handcuffed and taken by train over to Chicago. All of them were likely to be hung, and they probably now have several rooms available there at the Hennepin Avenue Lodging House. If you're careful enough and are willing to take a bit of a risk, that might be a place to offer you a night's lodging.
There is the Liverpool Lodging House.
Would be very cautious about considering the Liverpool Lodging House. In fact, I think you should scratch that one off your list. It's totally filthy and disgusting. It's a place for vagrants for the most part, and it's considered one of the city's worst fire traps. So it didn't surprise anybody in Minneapolis when this boarding house suddenly burst into flames. The fire started when a drunk guest knocked over a lighted lamp, and it caused another guest to die from choking on the smoke. You'd be much better off staying someplace else.
There is the Durgin Boarding House.
In my estimation, the Durgin boarding house may not be as bad as some of the other ones. They do have a room that's been made recently available if you don't mind staying in a room with stained carpeting. During the night, a lodger who was an army paymaster grew despondent over his finances, put a gun to his head, and blew his brains out. He left a number of suicide notes and farewell letters on the bureau. Probably most of these have already been sent on to the addressees at this point, but the room is now vacant, so you might want to inquire there about a place to stay.
There is the Nashville Hotel.
If you read the newspapers lately, you probably know all about the Nashville Hotel. The kitchen is closed because of that explosion, but I understand that there are still rooms in the floors above that are available for hire. The coffee shop on the ground floor was the only place that went up in flames. They had a new gasoline stove and it blew up, and the explosion was so loud that it alerted the fire department directly without having to notify them. They got to the hotel quickly and contained the fire to the first floor and the coffee shop and restaurant area, but there were several injuries. The cook who was by the stove was set on fire, and a waiter tried to smother out the flames with a tablecloth. She was only 20 years old, and her screams of pain could be heard from blocks away. She was taken to a hospital, and she's not expected to live. I think gasoline stoves are very dangerous. The thing is, nowadays, you don't really know what kind of stoves a hotel is using. The traveling public just has to take their chances.
There is the Brunswick Hotel.
I think very highly of the Brunswick Hotel. It's one of the nicer hotels for business travelers. I do think that some of the recent safety concerns have been drawn out of proportion. They just had an unfortunate incident of having 3 hotel fires in one night. It was not an arsonist, nor does it appear to be systematic. I would stay there as long as I had some clear means of escape. Last night was very unusual. The first fire in the middle of the night caused guests to run out onto the streets in their night clothes. The fire then was quickly contained. Then the same thing happened all over again, and I would guess that many guests had a hard time falling asleep that night. Then the fire shot up a third time at the exact same spot as the other 2 fires. After the firemen tore down a wall, they found that a pair of electrical wires had been rubbing together, and they kept sparking and reigniting the building. But I think that they have this now fixed. So I think that this is a perfectly safe place to stay the night. The Brunswick Hotel is a very busy hotel, and it's located on a very busy street, and one has to be very cautious when crossing Hennepin Avenue. Unfortunately, a female employee of the hotel was not careful enough, and she walked right in front of a moving streetcar. She screamed as the streetcar hit her and pitched her forward on the track, and then the streetcar ran over her. The streetcar then reversed and ran back over her. Pedestrians could hear her skull being cracked and her face being crushed. Passers-by noticed that she was still alive and carried her into the lobby of the Brunswick Hotel and sought a doctor to come to attend to her. The girl ended up living after all this ordeal, and she was considered a medical miracle. I generally have a very good opinion about the Brunswick Hotel. Usually you can expect the staff at the Brunswick Hotel to be courteous and professional. If you ask to see an available room prior to renting it, they will most likely be able to accommodate your request. Recently, the front desk clerk made a mistake by showing a room 81, which was already occupied. It was surprising that the door was locked from the inside. Once he got the door open, he found a dead guest who had asphyxiated himself with the room's gas lighting system. The room was so full of gas that the bellboys had a hard time crossing the room in order to open up the windows. Evidently, the gas had been flowing for 2 or 3 days. I don't know if the prospective guest ended up getting a room at the hotel, but there are some others available there if you would be interested.
There is the West Hotel.
The West Hotel has always been one of the finest hotels in the city. So if you go there, please understand that they may be very hesitant now to rent out the better rooms. They were just egregiously swindled. The West Hotel was just visited recently by a dapper young man who went to the front desk and asked for the hotel's best room. He was given room 240. He ordered delicious meals and enjoyed lounging in the luxury accommodations. He was making the most of his Christmas holiday stay. And after a while, the hotel inquired how much longer he expected to stay. The guest replied that he expected to stay up until the point where the hotel realized that he had no money to pay them. Upon saying this, he ran out the hotel entrance. When a bellboy chased after him, the guest threatened him with a handgun. The hotel manager and several other men were also joining in the chase through the the Minneapolis streets. Eventually, when he was cornered by a crowd and the police, the young man shot himself through the head. Quite a Christmas story. But otherwise, things are fairly normal at the West Hotel, and you should enjoy a good stay while staying there.
There is the Holmes Hotel.
If you're just looking for a room and really don't care so much about a water-damaged hotel lobby, then the Holmes Hotel might be a prospect to consider. The hotel just had a rather exciting 3-alarm fire that drew lots of crowds, but the fire was actually contained mostly to the roof and the upper water tower, and not the individual guest rooms, so they might have a few single rooms available right now. I'm sorry we weren't able to offer you a room tonight. But at least I hope that you find a safe place to stay and don't have to sleep in the gutter or some dangerous hotel. To stay updated about dangerous places in the city, you may want to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay fully informed. Until next, safe dreams and safe travels.